Nick Angstadt, Locked On Mavericks here, and I'm joined by positive Chuck Mockler and William the Opinion Updyke from the Locked On Clippers podcast. We're going to get into a lot of stuff today. Crossover episode. We'll get into it on Locked On Mavs and Locked On Clippers right now.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Clippers. My name is Nick Angstadt. I'm the host of Locked On Mavericks, media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network. And I am joining, depending on which feed you're listening to this on, Charles Mockler, Will Updyke. They go by their nicknames. I said them already, but yeah. Here we go, boys.
Is this Locked On Clavrix? What are we doing today?
No, that's terrible. Mavs?
Mippers? I don't know what it would be. I'm
all
excited,
terrible.
man. I'm nervous for this series, partly, but I'm excited for this podcast because, hey, second year in a row, we're all doing this.
On today's show, we are going to do a full crossover. Basically, you'll hear from the Clippers guys. Clippers fans will hear from me on the Mavericks side of things, and we'll just talk about this series and why the Mavericks are going to win in 6. That's basically what we're going to talk about this whole time. Today's episode is brought to you by Locker Room. Download the app and join us sometime this week on Locker Room. Get in on the action. Locker Room, changing the way we talk sports. All right, let's get into some stuff. All right, I got a couple questions about the Clippers, and we'll start there.
Let's go.
I'll start with Chuck. Rondo. What's the deal with Rondo?
Well, okay, so it makes sense as a Mavs fan, you're maybe not as into Rondo.
No, very against Rondo.
So, I mean, full disclosure, I was heartbroken when the trade was made. I love Lou Williams. We gave up 2 picks. He's also on the roster next year. I'm just trying not to think about that for $7.5 million. But Ty Lue trusts him. He's already seen a substantial amount of time. I think he's probably going to be in some of those closing lineups. And we just got to, I've been proven wrong about Rondo, I think, up to this point, but we got to wait for playoff Rondo to show up, right? Like, that's what the whole argument hinges on. So if he doesn't show up, I don't know where we're at. Yeah,
Rondo has been, I think, a good addition to the Clippers. I think, if I push all the Mavs fandom aside, he has been a positive, I think, for that team. He's almost more of a coach to me. That every time I've watched the Clippers, he's almost more of a coach than a player at times. He's just always up with Ty Lue, clapping or talking or barking at somebody. And it seems like he's the guy that, if whatever happened to the Clippers in the Denver series last year, it feels like he's the guy that's supposed to go in on the court and kick him into shape and hey, let's not lose to the Denver Nuggets. Right? Let's not lose a series that we're not supposed to lose, basically. What percentage do you think he's a coach or a player? Will, if you had to put a percentage on it, because it feels like it's kind of 50-50 to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's maybe even 60-40. I was really interested when he first came to the team before he even played a minute on the court. At every single time out, he was talking to guys. He was right there with Ty Lue. I think that he was a big part in sort of getting Pat up to speed, in all the things that you can do off the court before you're back on there. They would constantly be talking. It's like 2 guys who see the game at a fairly high level and have that kind of vet experience to where they can relay things that are happening on the court to one another. I mean, I would be very surprised if having a conversation with them wasn't those 2 annoying friends that you're hanging out with, and you're I have no idea what the hell either of these guys are saying.
Yeah.
So
did he just make a Connect 4? Did he make a Connect 4 metaphor?
Yeah. He's you're red, you gotta be yellow. No, it's gonna be interesting. I'm really looking forward to see him and Carlisle's interactions, if they even look at each other.
I know.
During this series.
So that's the thing. If you're a Clippers fan, you're listening to this, why are you guys talking about Rondo, first of all? And if you don't remember, and if you're a new Mavs fan, Rondo was on the team, obviously. Dirk, asked for the trade, basically, get me somebody that's going to help this team. They brought in Rondo.
That's what Kawhi did, too.
From the Celtics. Yeah, they basically did the same thing. Brought in Rondo in the trade. They sent Jay Crowder to Boston, and Dwight Powell actually came with Rondo in that trade. And Rondo just did not work with Carlisle. And as many point guards have, but he's probably the biggest example of a point guard not working with Carlisle. And they got into it. I actually was at the game where he stomped off the court and just completely left the building when they were playing the Raptors. That was like a random game I was at before I was even covering the team. And then in the playoffs, he said, his back hurt, he couldn't play. And then they literally like ousted him from the team, so much so he didn't get his playoff share of like the revenue or whatever that they got.
Really?
It got,
wow.
They have to vote for that, and it got that bad. So it's just wild stuff. And so it's a new wrinkle to this series, and obviously a lot of the stuff is the same from last year. But one of the new ones is, what's Rondo gonna do? Right? Like, is he gonna try to get into Carlisle's head? Is Carlisle gonna try to get in his head? Is he gonna? Nobody on the Mavs except for Dwight Powell probably remembers him, like even on the Mavs. But
and there's that weird gif of him looking at Luka really weird when he was on the Lakers last year. So he's going to try and get in people's heads. He was yelling that Trez was a baby the entire time that he had the ball in Clippers-Lakers the last time they played. Like, he was yelling, he's a baby, he's too small at Trez. So there's going to be some weird stuff.
They destroyed him, too, in those minutes.
Yeah.
Like, Cousins looked great.
Well, I mean, that is normal, right? Like the Mavericks did that to Montrezl last year,
true.
Too. That's another thing that's new this year. We can kind of get into it. Is Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell are off the team, and so the Mavericks aren't going to be able to, like they did last year, to just completely like attack them over and over again. I feel like it's going to be Reggie Jackson this time, and Luke Kennard if he plays, right? Do you guys think Luke Kennard's going to even get a playoff spot in the playoff rotation, right? Like, that would be the other guy I would think that they would try to attack, but it doesn't seem to be there this year.
Things are either going to be going really well or really bad if Luke Kennard's on the court in this round one, honestly. And you mentioned Reggie Jackson, and like we're worried. We're obviously very worried about Luka. It's going to be interesting what the Mavs do in the non-Luka minutes. Who's generating offense? Like, who do you think in the playoffs? Because I know the rotations are shorter. Who should the Clippers bench look out for?
Yeah, their offense is going to be generated from Jalen Brunson and Tim Hardaway Jr. And then Kristaps Porzingis when he plays. It's really going to depend. I'm very interested to see when Kristaps Porzingis plays in this series. We'll talk about it a little bit, but there's some pretty positive signs based on the schedule. There's 2 days off between the first couple of games there. Like, there's 2 days off between game 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and then 4 and 5. I thought that was huge for the Mavericks, especially for Porzingis and recovery and all that. So, but yeah, offense will be generated from Jalen Brunson, Tim Hardaway Jr., who, we're basically 2 slumps away from being in that 6th man of the year conversation, I think. And yeah, they've just been absolutely great this season. Tim Hardaway has been great starting and off the bench. Tim Hardaway will probably start in this series. That's kind of where the Mavs have been trending.
Makes sense.
But
he's so
goddamn
good.
He'll also play when Luka's off. When Luka's on the bench too.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, Luka's going to average 40 minutes. he has to.
He may, especially with time off between. He may I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be real fascinating. So you guys are like super worried about Luka, because I don't think there's a single player the Mavericks are super worried about. Kawhi has had spurts where obviously
that might be dangerous.
He goes off. He goes off against the Mavericks, but it hasn't been like he goes off for 35 or 40, right? It just doesn't seem like he goes off in that way. But defensively,
in the playoffs,
defensively, he completely just wrecks things for 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden the Mavericks are down like 10. It feels like in clutch time and things.
I'm excited to watch Kawhi on Luka. Pat Bev does not defend him very well. No. I mean, no one really does. But it's going to be nice. Like, Will and I have talked about how it felt like this whole season Kawhi's kind of been ramping up, and then he was playing great, and then he got hurt, and now it's kind of like back to this ramp-up thing. And what's most indicative of how Kawhi is ramping up is his effort on defense, like straight up. And if we see that locked in early on Luka when maybe they switch off of Morris or something like that, we'll really know that Kawhi's like in playoff mode.
I'm interested. I'm ready to see that. I love watching Kawhi. I think he's a great player. I think that he's a free agent, and the Mavericks have lots of cap space this summer. So
he's not going to Dallas.
That's the bit we've been doing for like 3 months now. Ever since Giannis signed, we're like, "Yep, we're moving on. It's Kawhi now. This is the next guy." Yeah,
Cuban will have to fly him back and forth after every practice, and then maybe honestly, like if you can guarantee he can be in San Diego by the time the sun goes down, he'll probably do it.
I just want to see how him and Luka like relate or how they talk, right? Like, I just want to see how either of them communicate And
it'd be all nonverbal. It'd be all like weird looks and like
because Luka and Boban will like be dancing or joking around at the beginning of games, and I just don't see Kawhi as a guy to get into that. Or he would do the opposite and he would get into it, but like in a really weird way where he would just be standing next to them and looking at them while they're dancing.
Oh yeah, like Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh used to do that weird stuff on the game.
In his brain, think he was participating, but really not.
Yeah, that's a good call. Are you worried? So, like, are there any new wrinkles we're going to see from Carlisle, or is what we saw in the regular season what we're getting from the Mavs?
Yeah, this is a good question.
That in a bad way.
This is a good question. We'll get into it coming up. What's different in this series? What's different for the Mavericks, the Clippers, Carlisle versus Ty Lue? That's a different matchup than it was last season. We'll get into that coming up. But before we do, let's talk about Theragun. Theragun is the way to get stress out of your daily life. If you have stress that weighs down your body, whether you're an elite athlete or someone like us, I don't know if Will, are you an elite athlete? Chuck?
Could be, you know.
I'm borderline elite.
Should have won state, to be honest with you.
I was just gonna say. Just trying to make it through the day, tension-free. Theragun can help. Theragun is a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power, which is what Luka's going to do to the Clippers. And it's as quiet as an electric toothbrush. Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension using Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone.
Unbelievable stats.
We got stats on the Theragun. Try Theragun for 30 days starting at only $199. Go to Theragun.com/lockedon right now. Get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's Theragun.com/lockedon. Theragun.com/lockedon. Get your Gen 4 Theragun. Go get it. Release that tension. Go deeper. 60% deeper. All right, guys, let's get into some more stuff about this series. So, obviously, these teams played last season. We kind of got into, at the top of the show, stuff that we were really into. And now, what is different? What is Carlisle going to do that's different than last season? Well, there's one thing that really stands out to me. And it may seem small, and it may seem not that important, but I think it is. Dwight Powell and Willie Cauley-Stein, who are, like, individually not that great, like not great players. You'd be like, oh, I'm not worried about either of those two guys. But they're two guys that give the Mavericks a role threat that they did not have last season. The three big men that played in the series last year were Porzingis, who played half of game 1 and not game 3, 4, 4, 5, and 6. And then Boban, who was like played spot minutes and only kind of played against Montrezl Harrell, right? Like they didn't really play him against Zoo that much.
Yes, he did.
And so that may not happen this season. And then Maxi Kleber was the other guy that played, and he's stretch 4, can play some defense, and he guarded Kawhi actually last year.
Is he going to be back? Is he still kind of rampant? Is it unclear?
He's ramping up. He's been in practices. He's been in non-contact practices until just on yesterday, Wednesday. If you're listen to this, and so he is going to play, but he's kind of up and down. The Mavericks did make the trade for Josh Richardson, and so that's kind of the guy that they hope to defend one of these Clippers guys. But I think these two big men are what is going to change things because they have a role threat. They have a guy that can roll down the lane, that can pick, roll, all that kind of stuff. That's not something they had last season because Porzingis, it should be a role threat, but he's not explosive enough athletically to be one. And so I think that's the big change from the Mavericks side that may seem small, but I think actually just gives them a different look that they can take when the offense is kind of bogged down and they're not when they stop hitting their jumpers, which will come eventually.
That's a good call. I mean, the Clippers big man rotation is completely different too, right? Like we don't have to watch Trez hemorrhage our points.
Or play like 20 minutes in a row.
Yes. Zoo's passing out of the short roll has been way better this season. Like his passing was kind of talked about like for the last 2 seasons and we just never saw anything of it. And this year it's actually kind of flourished. There is kind of a question mark with Serge though.
And he's also a European center, so you're like, he has to be a good passer, right?
He has to be a good passer.
It seems like a thing that just comes with the territory, but it's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah, and then, I don't know, I'm a little worried about Serge, just health-wise, but he looked good in those last 2 games. Will, what do you think the biggest difference is other than the centers for the Clippers is?
I think that the team is just a lot deeper and more versatile than it was last year.
Which is wild. They had 2 6 Man of the Year candidates last year. Sorry to interrupt, but like
totally.
That's a fair point.
It's so strange to me because the team is obviously better than it was last year. Like all the numbers say that they're better, but they have less talent, right? Like, would you say that they had less talent than last year?
So I think the big thing for me is like I mean I would agree with you. Like looking at it roster for roster, last year I would have said, oh, last year is definitely the better roster. But I think what we neglect to like remember or contextualize is that second unit was so rigid in terms of what it could operate or do. Like it was limited to limited to pick and roll. Yeah,
pick and roll. And not
only,
even elaborate.
And only pick and roll between two players. They never really got shots, even for somebody like JaMychal Green, who was a great shooter. He ended up leaving the team, because of what his usage was going to be like. So I think that we've gotten a little deeper, but like the bigger thing to me is just the versatility. You can swap guys in and out of that starting lineup. We have like 2 other guards on the roster other than Pat that I would be comfortable running with the starters, and I would not I would not feel nervous about it. Charles already mentioned the center rotation, but our wings are, I think, a lot better this year too. And then we gotta have some different looks at the guard position that are guys like Luke or Man that like I'm not necessarily trusting, in big playoff minutes, but they got to come in and play a couple possessions, or if Luke has to get something started offensively, it's a much different look than anything else on the Clippers roster. So I think that the depth is different. Like maybe the higher tier of offensive talent isn't there, but everyone's a little bit more well-rounded, and we just have that many more looks.
Yeah, it seems like both teams are thinking that too, right? Like both teams have more looks, and it's wild that they're meeting in the first round. Like sometimes
yet again.
Well, I'm curious. Like, what are Mavs fans feeling about this matchup? Like, I mean, I'm assuming you wanted to see Denver.
Right.
Like what is the general feeling kind of from the fan base, I guess?
Yeah, the other thing is that both teams' fan bases wanted different teams, right? You guys,
dude, what the hell? It's of course we wanted the Blazers all day. Like, that's 4 games, no problem. Like, yeah, I don't know what.
Yeah, so
did you guys get accused of tanking at the end of the season too, or no?
Well, some people did, but if you watched the games, like the last game they played was against Minnesota. They didn't rest anybody that they didn't need to until the end. They played the Raptors the second to last game, and they almost lost that game, which was just like maybe one of the most embarrassing moments of Mavs, like one of the most embarrassing wins of the last 2 years. And then they played Minnesota in the last game. And they played all their guys, and they still lost. So everyone looked at the score and said, "Oh, the Mavs are down 20. They're trying to lose." I don't know if they're necessarily trying to lose.
Yeah, I don't think Luka's out there trying to lose.
They just did lose. This Mavs team has had so many bad losses against inferior teams. They lost to the Thunder with both their guys. They lost to the Rockets when they were down a bunch of guys. Like they've had some really bad losses. The Timberwolves loss, I guess, at the end of the season was bad. And so they play down and up to their competition. And so,
just like the Clips, that's pretty similar to the Clippers, honestly.
Honestly, so this past week I went through and did a preview with pretty much every single playoff team, our hosts. I did one with Chuck. I've done one with everybody, and almost every single host said that their team plays up and down to competition. Like the only one that didn't say it was the Bucks. It was like Kane Pittman was the only one that said that they beat the teams they're supposed to and don't necessarily beat the teams they're not. And then Blazers also. Blazers don't beat the teams ahead of them, like obviously.
Very true.
Like the the Clippers, and then they beat the teams that they're supposed to. But yeah, I think that Mavs fans are worried obviously about the shooting. Like the Mavs do not defend the 3-point line well, and I think that has become a real identity for the Clippers, and I think that they're really concerned about that. Like you look at the stats, if you just pull it up, you see 5 or 6 guys shooting 40% from 3, and that just terrifies you as a Mavs fan.
Yeah, what's crazy too is like we're not even taking that many. I think we're still below average in 3-point attempts, which has been
right in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, so that is where I mean, I'm not. If I were a Mavs fan, I'd be a little concerned about the wing depth for defense for who the Clippers have. You got Mook, PG, and Kawhi in that starting lineup. Was 3
even more true last year.
Right.
It was even more true last year.
And you got 3 guys who can, Kawhi's outside shooting is good, obviously, but we're not looking to him for threes. So, I mean, if the ball's moving crisp from the start of game 1, which I'm a little worried about, I would be a little more worried if I was a Mavs fan, but these Clippers kind of start slow. You know what I mean? Like, it might, 1:30 p.m. game, like, there might be some ugly turnovers to start this one in game 1.
Also, the Mavericks, I think this is still true. 21-0 when they lead after the first quarter this season.
What?
Wow.
That's wild.
It may be 22, it may be 20, but it's
either way. That's
somewhere
incredible.
In there. Yeah, they are incredible if they win after the first quarter. Now, do I think that stat will continue into the playoffs? No. do I think many regular season stats matter this season? I don't think so, right? Like it's just so
That's
hard.
That's a good point, actually. What ones from the Mavs do you think matter in the play? Because like obviously 3-point shooting for the Clippers matters. I think defensive rating, sure, but the rotations get shortened, so you don't get like the worst defenders in there for each team. and like maybe like assists per game, like
maybe clutch stats I think maybe matter, which we can get into with the Clippers, but like because at the end of the games you're gonna put in the best guys, but it's so hard because you just have to qualify everything this year. Like if you even look at the couple of games the Mavs and Clippers have played this season, none of them count, right? Like there's a 50-point game at the beginning of the season.
One of them definitely doesn't count.
Yeah, right. There was a 50-point game where Kawhi and Porzingis didn't play, and that was just an outlier crazy game. And then the Mavs won another game by like 16 points, and so they're 2-1 against the Clippers with like a point differential of 67.
Yeah,
which is like wild. So you just look back and you'd have to see who was playing in each game and go back and like document it. And it's just so hard to tell. The Mavericks also, like if you look at their whole season, the entire month of January was just absolute trash, like garbage. Like you just have to throw out all those stats because Porzingis was on and off, and Luka played mostly, but then everyone else, you had 4 or 5 guys, like they're almost their whole rotation dealing with COVID. They went to a game in Denver, and then they were stuck in their hotel rooms in Denver for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. I forgot. I almost totally forgot about that.
It was so nuts. Yeah, the Mavericks were affected by COVID, the second most behind the Boston Celtics.
Wow.
And then
wow, that's crazy.
And then some of them were not even necessarily COVID, but like Willie Cauley-Stein missed an entire month with health and safety protocols, and it was never defined what it was. And so everyone was like, okay, he tested positive for COVID, and he never said he did. But then the day he came back, he was out for a month. The day he came back, he got the vaccine. And so you're like, well, you can't get the vaccine if you've, just recently had COVID. So it was there's just been some weird stuff with the Mavs this season with COVID, and they were affected a lot. But they've overcome it, and then they've had a really good record ever since then. Basically, you start February 1st with the Mavericks. That's when they got their full team back, and you look at those stats. So
I think for the Clippers, you could start the season probably about a week and a half ago based on getting the full roster back. So
yeah. Coming up, let's get into what this Clippers season has been overall, and then we'll talk about the schedule. We'll talk about predictions and different things like that. We'll get into it coming up. But before we do, let's talk about BetOnline.ag. It is the one place to put down some money on sports. Go there right now and put some money down on. We've been tracking this Mavs Clippers series over the last couple of days, and first it started, the Clippers were a minus 400 favorite, and now if they have it, it's back to minus 400. It was minus 370 yesterday.
Ooh, so getting close to that even money.
They've changed it up a little bit, and so it's gone back up. They apparently have less faith in the Mavs than they did yesterday. But yeah, this Nets number is wild to me. Minus 1,300. Nets are our favorite to win the series. The Blazers are now the favorite in the series when the Nuggets were a couple days ago. So a couple
the
of things
Blazers are the favorites. I would not take that bet.
Yeah, Blazers.
I would bet the Nuggets
are the favorite there. The Lakers and Suns. The Lakers obviously open as the favorite, but not by a ton. That's not a huge number there. And then Hawks are favored over the Knicks in that series. So you can put money down on any of those series. They also have all kinds of other stuff. They have futures. You can look up who's going to win the conference. The Clippers are second favorite to win the conference behind the 7th seed Lakers. How does that feel?
I mean, no one likes it, right?
Yeah, definitely not Mavs fans. Definitely not my co-host who loathes them more than maybe sin itself. So go to BetOnline, use the promo code LOCKEDON, get a 50% welcome code with your first 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, gentlemen, let's get into some more stuff about this Clippers team. What is this Clippers season been like? Just give me a brief overview, kind of like I did with the Mavs just there of, you guys said the season started about a week ago. What makes you say that? Where has this team been with their continuity? Because that's sort of the whole thing. Chuck and I talked about in our preview of the Clippers is that the Clippers have felt like this season had way more continuity than last year, but has it been that way because they still haven't played a ton of games with all their guys?
The Clippers clipped. I mean, they do what they do. So no, I mean, like it's hard because like looking at the standings and the record, like it doesn't really jump out at you. And yeah, there were basically the same continuity issues as we had last year. What I think looked a lot different was the process leading up to that this year. I think that's kind of like why it's a bummer that we sort of tanked those last couple of games and ended up 4th because this was a team that really did steal some wins out sometimes a full starting lineup against another team in a really hard-fought victory. And it's just, there's a resiliency that we never saw last year and just sort of a commitment to figuring out rotations and sort of finding what works. I mean, last year, we didn't really change anything. We kind of ran the same stuff. When we got in a jam, we leaned on the same things that we had done all season. And I just don't think that it A, ever built good habits, and B, it didn't leave guys like a lot of faith that, their number was going to come up or that they were a significant contributor in this. And I think that shows in sort of the locker room struggles that they had last year. I mean, last year in a close game, down the stretch, you would see guys just like bowing their heads down in the huddle. Like it was over. You knew it was over. Like that. I mean, no one really even wanted to try. And this year, I mean, it's just, guys are talking to each other a lot more. I mean, like the continuity thing, I don't even know how much you can truly put into it because winning is a bigger deal than continuity. And that's
like our Michelob Ultra question. Like, do you win because you're happy, or you happy because you win, right? Do you win because of continuity, or do you get continuity because you win?
Yeah. Exactly. So I think that there was like a lot more of that. And then, like the constant sort of thing that we hear from the players in media availability again and again is that there's like a system in place where everyone is kind of calling each other out and no one takes it personally. And we had nothing resembling that last year.
No, there was one guy in particular who seemed to take things very personally when he would be called out. He's no longer on the team, so that's good. Rodney Magruder. No, I'm just kidding. It's Monty.
Get him.
Yeah, we're turning into the Warriors over here.
Light years ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this series and these playoffs so much more than last year. Last year, there was this idea that like, sure, the Clippers had the personnel to win a championship, but that's what they had. They only had the personnel. They didn't have the coaching. They didn't have the game plan. There wasn't a process.
You never felt like that with Doc Rivers at all. Like he'd won a title as a coach. You never felt like he was a guy that could.
It never felt.
Dude, I think I'm calling bullshit on this. I think that's like revisionist history. I definitely thought Doc was capable of winning a title. I mean, I look what he did with that 18-19 team, and I was
capable, sure.
Like I was all aboard the Doc train. Like I thought that at the time he was like a motivator of men. But if there's something that we know about Doc Rivers, it's that like he doesn't really manage personalities that well. I don't think. I mean, we saw that with the Celtics, and like you hear about all the falling out there leading up to that championship run. I mean, it just, and I feel like that's part of why the Lob City era never really worked out. Personalities were never effectively managed. Sure. And I think that's what we saw more of, man. And it's, he's a great coach. He's a solid X and O's guys. I mean, he's really committed to defense despite like, I mean, I never saw it with the Clippers, but the idea
their entire
of it is
bench
there.
Couldn't defend.
But the thing for me is like, I don't think that he can walk in and like solve personnel disputes. And I think that is another thing that you have to be able to do as a coach. I mean, I think that's
or
like,
make adjustments.
Yeah, right. And I think that's like something
true.
like it's a shift of the league though, right? Because there used to be like this old guard where it's like what coach says goes, and then you have someone like Steve Kerr or something, and it's like, no, dude, part of this job is honestly just being an HR manager and making sure that everyone can play together. And Doc Rivers could never do that.
Yeah, Carlisle is definitely still in that old mentality, but he He dabbles,
but he wins, so it doesn't matter. If you win, it doesn't matter.
He dabbles every once in a while in like the new school, like trying to reach people where they are and stuff. And so you're like, like he's trying, he's making strides, but
he's like doing a rap in the locker room.
He's like, hey, my name is Luka. And it's like, okay.
No, but he does. He did fly to Slovenia and Latvia and meet with these guys, and like when
that's cool.
Like when Dennis Smith, well, he flies his own plane, so maybe not all the way to there, but he's a pilot. So yeah. That's really interesting. So I've seen a couple people, especially Mavs fans, like think that, all right, we have the coach advantage for sure. Rick Carlisle is going to outcoach Ty Lue to the nth degree. And then I went on Clippers Reddit today and I saw a Photoshop of
Clippers Reddit, man.
What was Anya Joy
Taylor's
Taylor's
your eyes after?
What was that? What was the the chess show? What was it called? Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit. Yeah.
It was this edit of Ty Lue as the girl from Queen's Gambit, like.
That's unsettling, even just hearing you describe.
But it was like Ty Lue's gonna make the best moves and blah blah blah. I was like, maybe that guy just thought of that edit and thought it was cool. But the coaching matchup, I think, is gonna be real interesting because if the Mavs do have a huge advantage there, then all of a sudden I think that's big. But if all of a sudden it's like even, then I think that the Mavs' chances to win are a little bit less, and it's hard to tell.
So I love Rick Carlisle as a coach. I love Ty Lue as a coach. I think there's a slight advantage for Carlisle. I don't think it's a huge gulf that maybe. I think Ty Lue gets a bad rap too. Like anytime you coach LeBron James, like people thought Eric Spoelstra like wasn't a very good coach.
True.
He wanted Eric Spoelstra fired. So I think in that sense, Ty Lue gets a bad rap. And like, once we hired Ty Lue, I read so many excerpts and quotes of like Steve Kerr being like, I don't know how he figures these plays out. Doc Rivers would be like, he has a book of every ATO that he's ever gone against. Like, he's an unbelievably good coach. And I think what's going to hinge on that is these wrinkles, right? Like Ty Lue is kind of notorious for having playoff stuff. And like, I think he had a quote once where he was like, we're working on a secret playoff defense when he was coaching.
No, stop.
I think so.
He comes out with a water bottle that says Ty Lue's secret stuff.
Yeah. He's just in uniform. He's like, this is the new plan. But I think we're going to see some new wrinkles. I think we're going to see some stuff we didn't see at all. We're going to see a lot more small ball, which might flummox the Mavs. Who knows? But
yeah, the Mavs have not played small. I'll stop. Talk there. The Mavs have not played small at all this year. They always play with one big, whether it's Porzingis or Carlisle Stein or Boban or Dwight Powell. When the Clippers go small, it'll probably be Dwight Powell and whoever, or Maxey and whoever.
Or Maxey.
They've played a little bit with that, but not often.
And Ty Lue's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I made the mistake a couple pods ago, and I was like, yeah, sometimes they'll play Zoo and Ibaka together. And then I went back and looked, and I was like, that has never happened this season. I think it was talked about before the season that they would do that, and then it never actually happened.
We got a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, people are like, should they play? And it's like, no, they should not.
Why?
Play.
Yeah, well, it's always like, oh, you have a big man that can shoot. Maybe he should play with another big man. You're like, that's not necessarily.
Dude, people wanted Trez and Zoo to play together last year sometimes, and it was like. That what they did for 3 minutes, and I think they ran into each other trying to grab a rebound, and the other team got it. Like, no bullshit.
It is kind of interesting though that they haven't played together because I guess I don't foresee it happening, like, or them having to go to a lineup like that. I just can't imagine what the Mavs would do that would cause the Clippers to have to do that, because that would be interesting if they did that. Then all of a sudden you're like, well, this is this new lineup we're playing that we haven't ever played before, but.
Yeah, there's no continuity, right? Like Serge missed
true.
over half the season or something like that. So if we're seeing Serge and Zoo out there together, I think things are going horribly wrong.
Which would be great.
Right?
This podcast would appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, let's get into these predictions.
Yeah.
Will, how many games? Who's winning?
So I've been reiterating this. I'm going to judge a lot more of this series based on the Clippers' first 2 home games. If they split those, it's going 7 games. And then it really, to me, I mean, obviously it's a game 7, so it can go either way.
It goes anyway.
If they can take both 2 home games and like retain home court, then I think there's the possibility to get it done in 5. I still think like against a team this good, it's just really, really hard to do. I think like what we saw the Lakers do last year in the playoffs is a little bit of an anomaly because they had some battered up kind of opponents, So I don't think that we're going to be seeing in the West a lot of like these 5-game series. Maybe if you're playing a play-in, if you're playing a play-in opponent, but other than that, I think it's 6 games again. I think it's Clippers. But yeah, if they can't take care of home court in those first 2 games or they're slow to start, it's going 7. And it's kind of a coin flip for me at that point.
Oh man, I hope it goes 7. I will be like the tensest person ever if it goes 7.
100%. It'd be a nightmare.
So great. I mean, in our preview, we talked about the stakes for the Clippers. If it went 7, like imagine all the things that could happen if they lose.
I don't want to imagine all those things. Well, I think it's going.
The way I look at it. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is the Clippers are just not going to walk into Dallas and take back-to-back home games. It's just, I love this team. I think they're better than they were last year. I just don't think it's going to happen.
The thing is, the Mavs don't play that well at home this year. Now, I also just said that regular season games don't matter, but they haven't necessarily been dominant at home this year. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
It's been weird that there's been no fans for part of it. Like I feel like home stats, it's like everything's kind of. It's not everything is an away game, obviously, but like atmosphere wise, it kind of is.
Yeah, they also play. Yeah, they played a couple home games in that really bad stretch. But the Mavs are also going to have a lot more fans. I think we saw there's going to be like 5,000 more fans at Mavs games than at Clippers home games.
That sounds about right. Dallas is down to bring people in. I think it's going 6. I think it might go 5 if we see some crazy stuff from Ty Lue in terms of how Kawhi and PG are coming around screens or things like that. But I mean, the Clippers are really good, but dude, this 1:30 start time, I'm not hyped on that at all.
The brunch game.
Dude, it's going to be awful. But I think the Clippers take care of it in 6. And I won't feel bad if it's 6.
Why would you feel bad if it was 6?
Because, like, if we were playing the Blazers and it went 6, I'd be like,
it went
we're
6.
screwed.
You'd be like, oh, dang.
Yeah, this is not good. But the Mavericks, it's a very good team. And obviously,
they're same thing as last year, like a team that's better than their record indicates, which is unfortunate for them.
Yeah, that's true. I think last year they were about what their record should be, but this season, no, they should be better.
Yeah. And how many games are you taking the Mavericks in?
Oh, Mavs in 6. That's the official Locked On Mavs. The official
I saw
Locked
the
On
6
Mavs
seasons in a
prediction.
movie. Dude, if the Mavs win in 6, I'll put a billboard up that says some horrible thing about spotlights over 6 seasons or something like that.
Yeah, it'd have to be something Texas. Lone Star over something.
I don't know. You really 6, man, if the Mavs take this in 6, what a nightmare for the Clippers.
I think it's a little bit of a bit, but we really do. We believe in this team, and we believe that if healthy, I think that they can stick with the Clippers. I think that Luka is steps up in playoff series. The Clippers last season were like the one team that we were terrified of because we were like they're going to be able to guard Luka so well, and they just didn't. And we were like, oh God, this guy might be one of the best players ever. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those another time. We've thought this so many different times over his career, but we just thought again, like, dang, this guy really can just take it to these guys that are supposed to be able to stop him, and they just can't. So if that continues, if Porzingis actually plays all the games, then I think that that's another step up. That just gives him another guy that's going to drop 20. And in Game 3, if you don't remember, the Mavs won. The Mavs lost that game, but Luka went out with an injury in the fourth quarter, and he missed the fourth quarter. And Porzingis scored 12 points in the fourth quarter. He ended up with 38 points, I think, for that game. And I think he can take it to the Clippers a little bit. And so if he's going to play, if he's going to be pretty good, the Mavs have those roll threats. Like I said, that's another option. They have Josh Richardson, another wing guy to kind of throw at some of these guys. He may not start. He's been trending into the non-starter role because he's not necessarily played well. And then also the thing we've been kind of alluding to is the rest days. I think the rest days are massive for the Mavericks. That the start on this weird like noon game, and the Mavericks have a week rest, which the Clippers do too, but like a week rest, and then all of a sudden they're gonna have 2 days of rest after that game, 2 days of rest after that game. Like the Mavericks are gonna have so much rest and have these guys ready and prepared. They might get a practice day in between there.
Well, it's adjustments too, right? Like, because I'm worried about the Mavs offensively. Defensively, I'm not. Like, that's not that big of a concern to me. Yeah. Because the defense just
they're not good. They're not that good at defensive.
Yeah, it's just not equipped for the Clippers. But that's time to give Carlisle adjustments, and he's great when he has adjustments. And we'll see what Ty Lue can do with that rest too. But it is kind of an astonishing rest schedule. And I think Will mentioned this up top. Dude, the Clippers don't play very well with a lot of rest usually. Like we were, I think, undefeated on the second nights of back-to-backs. Like,
yeah, we lost like one of them.
Yeah, which like is kind of astonishing. But when we get rest, it's like we kind of start sluggish. So the week off and then the rest, the Clippers, the biggest issue is not putting themselves in a hole early. Like we can't just, it's probably going to end up a shootout a couple of these games, but we can't be having to do a shootout in like 8 minutes into the first quarter.
Yeah, and then the Mavs are 20-0 and winning after the first quarter. So
there you go.
They'll just win every game. Honestly though, Paul George is the wild card. Paul George did not play well in this series last year, and what's one of the reasons why the Mavs got a couple games. And I think that if he has so much to prove in this playoffs, right? Like
he does, yeah.
He has
we can't pretend that he doesn't.
And if he can step up and be like Pacers Paul George, or be Paul George that I guess you kind of saw with the
OKC Paul George.
Yeah, even that Paul George. Like if we see that guy, then this Clippers team should be able to take care of the Mavs, right? Like this Mavs team, outside of Luka and then a little bit KP, you're not really like Clippers. I don't see Clippers fans really scared of anybody. Like
you guys have shooters, right? Like you got a bunch of guys who are shooting over 35% from three. But yeah, like star wise, everyone on the Clippers wanted Tim Hardaway Jr., but you guys got him, which is a great signing. So,
the funny thing about that is that he was the Porzingis tax. Like he was in that trade, and they got him because his contract is so big. And the beginning of not this season but last season, I didn't think he was going to be in the rotation because he played so bad when he came over from the Knicks in that trade. And now a couple of people have made the joke that it was the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, not the Porzingis trade, because he's been so good at times during this season. It's been wild. But anything else? I mean, anything else on your chest? You want to call me out on anything? Well, you called out Chuck on a couple things. You can call me out if you want.
No. I think that about does it. I mean, like the biggest concern for Clippers fans is I just feel like we've struggled to defend really versatile guards. And it doesn't make sense. We have the personnel to do it. I don't know if we're going to be seeing anything different. I mean, all signs would point to yes, that there will be different defensive coverages and we'll try different things. But I mean, it doesn't give me the most confidence going up against any sort of super dynamic guard. So Luka is kind of worst case scenario for that.
So one of those.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Clippers are going to go as far as Kawhi and PG take them at the end of the day, really. So let's hope they're both locked in, man.
You guys are nervous.
And you better not try and steal Nick Batum in the offseason this year.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can't afford him. So, yeah, we're nervous this year. I mean, last year burned a lot of Clippers fans. Like, I'm confident in this team when they're healthy and if they're looking good, but playoffs haven't started yet, you know?
It's wild. It seems like the Clippers are looking ahead. Everyone was saying they were ducking the Lakers, and then the fans are like, hey, let's pay attention to this first round.
Let's get past the first round, maybe the second, before we start talking about long-term strategies.
It'll be really interesting.
First round.
It'll be really interesting. We'll see what happens. Go listen to Locked On Clippers. They'll have all the breakdowns. Locked On Mavs will have all the breakdowns of the Mavs stuff. We'll try to be nice when you guys are not here and all that.
Just don't make memes of us on the Mavs subreddit, and we won't do the same on the Clippers subreddit.
Oh man, there you go. We'll have more for you this weekend. We'll break down so many different podcasts of Mavs stuff. Dirk was on Bill Simmons. Tim Hardaway Jr. was on JJ Redick. Lots of stuff to break down. So we'll break that down over the weekend. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Clippers as well.
Yes.